Hello, it's lovely to be with you today. I'm Dr. Radha Modgil and I'm here with Intelligent Health to talk about stress, a practical guide on how to manage the day-to-day stresses that we all face. And let's face it, we all have stress in our lives. We're never going to get rid of it, but actually learning how to manage it and deal with it is far more helpful and, I think, a necessary and essential life skill. So I'm Dr. Radha Modgil. I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm a GP. I'm also a broadcaster across BBC and many other platforms, and I'm a writer. And I wrote my debut book, Know Your Own Power, all about this very thing, how to get through the stresses of life and how to deal with life when life hits you hard and when life events happen to you, how to actually manage those as practical tools. So I'm delighted to talk to you today a bit about what stress is, but most importantly, 3 steps on how to manage that stress a little bit better. So what is stress? Well, stress is a natural part of life. All the people on this slide will have experienced stress. Everyone on the street, as you pass them, will have experienced some kind of stress. And there are some positives of stress. Actually, stress is necessary sometimes. It helps us get motivated, it helps us act, it helps us deal with things in an acute situation, and it helps give us energy as well. But when we feel stressed, mainly it's an experience when we feel under threat or pressure and in a situation that we can't manage, we don't feel in control of, and that feels overwhelming. And this is when stress becomes detrimental to our health and well-being. So acute stress is okay in the right situation. Maybe, for example, that's a presentation or an exam. Maybe back in the day, it was when we were being threatened by a lion or a tiger. But when stress becomes chronic, intense, when you can't find a resolution or anything getting better, that's when it can cause an impact on your mental, physical and emotional well-being. And that's what we need to concentrate on today. And if we don't sort it out, it can increase the risk of developing mental health problems like depression or anxiety. So we need to have the skills and capacity to manage it. We can't eliminate stress, but when stress comes to us, how do we deal with it? How do we manage it? And I want to go through 3 steps with you today around how to notice it, how to look for any triggering events, but also what to do about it and how we can learn better to manage our stress. So first of all, notice any signs and symptoms. So firstly, your feelings. Feelings are a really good indicator. And every single day, it's important to stop, take a breath and notice how you're feeling. How are you doing in this moment today? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling like you haven't got enough time to do things, or actually that you've got too much to do? Are you feeling irritable? And are you finding it difficult to disconnect how fast your brain is racing away with those problems and ruminations? Very important to stop and notice your feelings. Your feelings are an indicator. They're a warning sign that potentially you could be stressed. Then we move on to your body. So anything that happens in our mind is reflected in our physical body. So that might be problems sleeping. Maybe you can't get to sleep. Maybe you're waking up early, or you're having intermittent sleep and waking up through the night. Maybe you're feeling tired all the time, or actually you're napping more. Maybe you haven't got the energy to do things that you used to do. Maybe it's translating into panic attacks where you're feeling really intense anxiety and overwhelmed. Or maybe you're feeling dizzy or nauseous or having stomach problems or tummy cramps. It's very important to stop and realise what kind of body symptoms we have, but also to make sure that any of these symptoms you might be experiencing aren't related to an organic cause. So very important to get advice from your GP or your doctor if you experience any physical symptoms, to make sure they're not coming from another cause, but potentially also help you identify if this might be stress related. Then we move on to behaviour. So how are you behaving to the people around you? How are other people noticing your behaviour has changed or altered, for example? You might be avoiding certain things, avoiding socialising. That's quite a classic one to drop off first. You might be doing less hobbies or activities, and also when you are working or doing tasks, maybe you're less productive or less efficient. These are all signs behaviourally that actually stress may be impacting you in quite a big way. It's very easy to see those sort of changes in other people, but much more difficult to notice them in ourselves. So every single day, every single week, make space in your diary to check in on yourself. How are you feeling? What's your body doing right now? And how are you behaving? How are you acting? What's changed? Could any of these things be a sign that you're stressed? The second stage then is to identify any triggers. Now, this is much harder to do, and actually I think it's really helpful to draw a timeline or write a list of what's happened to you in the last year or couple of years. Sometimes if we have one life event, for example, we might be all right if we have a bit of recovery and rest after that. But if we have lots of different life events happening very quickly, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other, or they're actually very prolonged in terms of over a 10 or a 5-year period, then actually we could be more vulnerable to the impacts of stress. What do I mean by life events? Well, bereavement, getting married or divorced, financial issues, illness, job changes or instability, lots of different things that can happen to us. And again, we need that resilience, we need that emotional reserve to bounce back from one of these events. But if we have multiple, lots of them, we need to identify this is what's happened to us. Much easier for us to step back and talk to a friend and say, well, hang on a minute, you're feeling stressed, but look what's happened to you over the last few years or weeks. No wonder you're feeling like that. This can also happen, or it might be helpful to identify a lack of respite from the stress. So if you don't have any recovery period, it's a bit like being in a boxing match where you get knocked down. You need to have a recovery period to help yourself get standing back up and get back involved in that match. And it's the same with life events. So have you not had any recovery time? Have you not had any respite from this? Also interesting and surprising to know that happy events, supposedly called happy events, like getting married or having a baby, can also be incredibly stressful. And it's important to realise that happiness is not necessarily different from being stressed. Important to recognise those big changes in your life. And also to get perspective. So can you get perspective on these triggers? Can you step back and see them for what they are? Like I said, drawing a timeline, writing a list, and actually just looking at it and saying, well, if this was a friend or someone else I knew, what would I be saying to them? How would I be helping identify that potentially they are stressed right now? And then the third step is taking action. So once you've noticed the signs and symptoms, you've identified the triggers, then what can you do? Well, first of all, you can problem solve. So what can you actually do in this moment to find some solutions to some of the causes of this stress? That might be delegation, for example. It might be saying no to people. It might be asking from someone for support. It might be just stepping away from a situation or a person. How can you problem solve practically? What things can you do to help eliminate or reduce the stress? Now, if we can't eliminate that stress and we can't reduce it, then how can we frame it better? If that's going to be there all the time and we have to expose ourselves to it, how can we reframe it? How can we think about it? How can we approach it? We can be in the same situation, but we can have a positive framing versus a more negative framing. And we can actually do much better in terms of how stressed we feel, even though the external situation and circumstances are exactly identical. We can also build resilience. So that, I mean, physically, so we can get more sleep, we can exercise, we can look at what we're eating. All of these things help build resilience to chronic stresses in our lives. We can also build resilience mentally. So we can do meditation, for example. We can employ mindfulness strategies. We can try and take our mind away through reading or arts or watching films or going in nature. And we can build resilience socially as well. So we really need to work on our relationships and friendships. When we're stressed, that's often the first thing that goes by the wayside. But actually, how can we engage with our friends? How can we build our networks? Our relationships are one of the key factors for our resilience and managing stress. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope that that's been really helpful. And I hope that actually everything I've said has given you some practical and tangible ways that you can feel a bit better and hopefully manage your stress in a better way too.